Welcome to Just Me podcast, and today we are joined by the fabulous, and I really mean fabulous, Corey Hastings. So, Corey, who are you? What do you do? And how would you describe yourself?
Thank you very much for the warm welcomes today. As my mum would say, it takes a fabulous person to know a fabulous person. So I'm
Oh,
excited for today's conversation. But yes, I am Corey Hastings, and I'm going to start with, when it comes to what I do, I'd say I'm a multi-hyphenate. This is a term that I came across a few years ago that gave me a lot of guidance. So most recently, I'm an executive director for the British American Business Council, Northern California, promoting the transatlantic relationship between the UK and the US. But I'm also a field hockey coach, a freelance creative, and a creative cultural guide, embracing that creative mindset and passion I have. But more importantly, though, I would say I'm a driven, passionate, loving, and charismatic individual, on the path of being, the best version of myself. And I'd like to think that I'm activating community and connection in my pursuits of this journey.
oh, how lovely! That's really nice. I love that description of being a multi hyphenate. I think that's fantastic. It's brilliant.
Oh, it was a huge game changer, in all honesty, for my life
Yeah,
path.
yeah.
And I would definitely encourage everyone and anyone listening to go and explore what that term means and what it means for them also. Where
Mm,
you're not just defining yourself by kind of your career or
yeah,
what it
one
is
role.
your title, so to speak.
Yes, brilliant. So, how have you arrived at today? What's your backstory and experiences through this wonderful journey of life?
Yes, so I'll try and keep it as short as possible. And I did say to you,
You-
Sid, that I have a tendency to maybe waffle and go off a little bit on track. So you make sure that I'm, where I need to be. But
Oh,
I will say started life with a very strong and nurturing upbringing. We're part of this wider Hastings clan that we talk about. So perseverance, embracing the uncomfortabilities of life, and following my heart is ultimately what was very instilled very at a very young age. Born and raised in Edinburgh, in Scotland, excuse me, and I grew up, as I said, as part of this strong family clan that kind of cemented those values, morals, and a very strong support system. That's where I discovered the love of sport, the love of nature, and my creative outletting in all forms. From drawing to painting to writing poems to play.
wow.
My family, and specifically my parents and sister, so my most intimate family, for sure shaped that kind of strong bond that we had. And so my sister, who's 3 years younger than me, she's my best friend. So we, for sure shaped my younger self. And I was a kid who kind of loved hard, I laughed hard, and I certainly played hard as well. And sport ultimately came into my life a little bit later on, but was definitely taught me discipline, working as a team. It was the passion. That passion was my key to success, and the importance of surrounding yourself with good people, teammates, and coaches.
Oh,
I have to give a shout out to what was called the Scott Squad, and still is, and that was my athletics team in at Meadowbank in Edinburgh, where I did a high jump, long jump, short sprints, relays, and that was arguably my first experience of what I would say is chosen family. And then I think for a lot of people who, follow the traditional path, I was
mm,
fortunate enough to find that traditional path, and it worked for me when I went to Northumbria University in Newcastle. And this is kind of like what shaped my adulthood, I would say. So I learned I had a skill set that I enjoyed and was good at, specifically design. And I applied that for internships that took me to the Netherlands. It took me to Denmark, and it really challenged my comfortabilities of living in, the bubble that is Edinburgh. So yeah, that was kind of like my adulthood, so to speak. And I go on a huge journey thereafter of
mm,
discovering, what it is to go into the working world after graduating with a dream job, or what I thought was a dream job, but ultimately finding a dream partner that kind
mm.
of conflicted that dream job journey. And so I met my husband virtually, funnily enough. So we were effectively pen pals. 3 years long distance during my university years, and it was when I graduated and that dream job came about that I locked in. But I also knew that if I didn't go and meet Daniel, I would always have that question mark as to who would this person be in my life. And
Wow.
funnily enough, I went over, didn't tell anyone apart from my sister, and that was to no fault of anyone other than what I thought was the right thing to do for me at that time. And yeah, met Daniel for the first time, and that 3 years of foundational. love and understanding manifested into the physical connection as well. And
Oh,
yeah, at that point, that's when I guess that whole love kind of manifested itself into reality. And we're, as I said, we are 10 year, or I didn't say, but yeah, we're 10 years married next year, and it's just been a whirlwind of a journey that I look back on. But yeah, we're here and embracing it, and that family has grown.
wow. And where are you living now?
So I currently live in Oakland, which is the Bay Area in California, most synonymous with the city of San Francisco. So I've been there for 8 years now, and had you told me I'd move to America and be there for so long, I think you would. Yeah, I don't know what this, you would be reading into or how this happened, but it is, and I found home away from home, so to speak. So yeah.
Oh, how lovely! Because I mean, your journey went over to kind of Europe was around working for Lego, wasn't it?
Correct. Yeah. So I had an incredible experience. And, you mentioned the Lego world and
Mm,
that word, and everyone knows what Lego
yeah.
is, and probably has a set, within their room right now. And I'm no different. Although I did grow up playing with Playmobil, so it was a little bit counter. And I made sure not to mention that in my interview. But
Good point.
no, I got this phenomenal experience where I wasn't actually doing toy design. We worked on
Mhm.
what's called the brand house, or the Lego house, which was a brand house for Lego, which was a hands-on play experience, and brought the company's values back to the core message that Lego's all about play and freedom of expression and creativity, and that age is not a boundary, and it through this tool you can come together, or you can find your own sacred space, and just get lost in a fantasy world, so to speak. And you
Mm.
know it was a short-lived experience, and one I know that I would have taken me on a very different path.
Mm.
But for me, I still learned a lot in that moment, living in a different culture, learning a lot about myself. But it also kind of like I used that skill set, I used that knowledge, and implemented it, all the way through my life, and will continue to do so. And even full circle moment actually brought me back to a lot of my ancestors. And I mean, for example, my grandma, who's my mom's mom, she actually was one of the individuals who brought the right to play as a child's international right. And so, yeah, it was kind of like, yeah, the world works in funny ways and mysterious ways. But yeah, that was my experience in Denmark for Lego.
How lovely. And what's it been like kind of navigating the world as kind of, the wonderful Corey Hastings when so much attention has been on, I suppose, your mum, but also, but your dad, but also your mum's story?
Right. It's so interesting because I think outwardly, I think a lot of people think we were probably more aware of just how big a name my
Mm.
dad was, and through
Mm.
extension my uncle, and as a result my family. And then and then through the mental health journey that my mum lived and experienced and was so open about as well, we were in the public eye.
Mm.
But they did a phenomenal job of protecting us from the world, I would say, especially at our younger years. I never felt pressured by my family.
Mm.
I never was forced into any particular path. If anything, it was more so, when we were around groups of individuals, or when we were in public celebrations that my dad was quite often invited to, it would be the question of, oh, what rugby team do you play for? There was always an assumption
Yeah.
that my destiny, I guess, was already chosen. But
Yeah.
my dad would always be very proud to say, like, nope, Corey doesn't play for a rugby team. He's an awesome hockey player. And
Wow.
that was always kind of reaffirming from a very young age. And likewise, my mom did an incredible job. And I don't think I actually realized just how impressive my mom was. She also was an athlete, a triathlete, a biathlete,
Mm.
a swimmer.
Mm.
She was a Commonwealth training athlete. Unfortunately, got injured, and it was interesting. It's interesting to see the different level of celebration and exposure that my mum would get in comparison to my dad, who's obviously plays a sport that's far more well
Yeah.
known in the public eye. So yeah, it actually Corey Hastings was. It wasn't even Corey Hastings. It was more so I was always just Corey, and Corey
Oh.
was allowed to be and to dream and to play
Oh.
and to hope and to just live. And so I think I've got a very unique story in that front, and I'm very grateful for it. Don't get me wrong. I think as we progress into adulthood, it become a little bit more
Mm.
aware because you start understanding the way of life a little bit more. But yeah, I don't think it applied this pressure that I think a lot of
Yeah.
outwardly a lot of people would think.
Because I mean, you don't. I mean, you can't really get bigger names in Scottish rugby, can you? Than Hastings, really. You know, Gavin and Scott. I mean, that's. But it's true. It's like. I mean, I grew up watching them and admiring them. I mean, an incredible rugby duo, weren't they?
Mm. Yeah, no, 100% so. And like, I don't need to, I'm sure there's a lot of listeners to your podcast who will
Mm.
have that similar
Yeah.
awareness experience. And just yesterday, actually, I was getting my haircut, and I recall my dad used to have a signature haircut that he had of a
Mm.
stripe on the right hand side of his head shaven in. And we were trying to look for a picture of it because I was going to do a little bit of an homage to him, but couldn't quite go back in the record books there. But I think what was so inspiring about Dad and Gavin is, they were amateur rugby players. They played for the love of the game.
Yeah.
They weren't
Yeah.
paid to play. And Dad often speaks about this. And I think without me even realizing, probably just until this moment that we're talking, it just brings up that another level of inspiration and pride that I have for him. And I think, that's the passion of the heart at the end of the day, right? And he did something that he loved, and then and he was good at it, and it has
Mm.
opened doors around the world, and I've seen that, and my sister and I have been very privileged to, benefit from it. But yeah, those tools and skills we can now implement and apply, and we've got amazing connections around the world that yes may have been open through dad or even mum.
Mm.
Um, Mum was a different kettle of fish, let's just say, in terms of connecting with people. And although they're my mum and dad's friends, they've naturally become our friends into adulthood, and then we meet their children, or connections, and the world has just opened up as a result, and it's been a beautiful um, place as a result for us.
That's lovely. So, what has kind of helped you kind of along the way to cope? You know, maybe to heal or simply carry on when things get kind of tough, because they do, don't they? I mean, regardless of how and where you've grown up and who you've grown up with, things
Mhm.
do get heavy. So what
Right.
kind of helps you continue on that? Because you are an incredibly positive, wonderful person. So what helps you?
It's interesting you say that because I think as a family we are incredibly positive, and
Mm.
almost I think dad was often quite labeled as like toxic positivity, which I don't know if that's I would promote that terminology, but I also understand where it comes from, because to be positive, to keep putting on that brave face, we've heard these terms before. It
Mm.
takes a lot, right? And
Mm.
it can add as baggage, and it can be heavy, and it can be very lonely as well,
Yeah.
in moments. I guess I think living, I have a very special relationship with all my family members, but me and my
Mm.
mom, I came from my mom. I was her first child, and that's not to take away from anyone
Mm.
in the family, but it's a unique bond to have, and we were very close.
Oh.
In fact, I was, I think the story was, and in fact, my dad was just telling me yesterday, my mum did a 10K run 2 weeks before she gave birth to me, which is like
No
unheard of.
way.
Yeah, no.
Wow.
So I've been in my mom's life from a very young age, and she used to work at her dad's stationery shop at front of desk, and I would go to work with her after I think 3 weeks, and I would be put in the window. I always like to think that I boosted sales for my papa's shop.
Yeah, brilliant.
So, but I say that to say is like my mom was. I looked up to her so much, and the way
Oh.
that she carried her light and shared her light to even people that she didn't know, and I think it just instilled like this is who I wish to be, and this is how I wish to live my life, from a very young age, and she kept me going. And then I think, as I got a little bit older, my sister's been the one to kind of open my eyes to this. I did ultimately become a young carer for her,
Mm.
to navigate that mental health journey that
Mm.
um, she finds so tough, as I think a lot of people do, whether
Mm.
they're open about it or not. And I think it almost was a distraction for me to not deal with my own mental health. And
Okay.
obviously, that's not the healthiest of things in retrospect. But I think I was just so invested in just giving back all that love and energy that my mom gave me that she became my priority. And
Wow.
as a result, I probably kind of didn't focus on my own journey until I'd say I was getting that adulthood of like traveling the world and living in different countries,
Mm.
finding Daniel and my eyes being open to a lot. Let's just put it.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd always kind of remind myself of those younger years of the joy that I had with my family and my upbringing.
And how has that relationship kind of developed with yourself and the family, and obviously now with Daniel, through
Yeah,
the years? Because, as you say, I mean, you grew up in a wonderfully structured, positive kind of environment. But
right.
then, because it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, you could have gone down the sport route,
Hmm.
hockey or whatever, but you
Hmm.
went down the creative route, which is because your sister was obviously a successful hockey player as well.
Very, yes.
So, how has that relationship kind of developed for you and for the family and for Daniel?
Yeah, no, it's funny you bring up like the sporting world. I think like
Mm.
I loved my sport as a youth athlete. I was a talented youth athlete, and yeah, it did ultimately come to that decision of am I going to go down my sporting route, or am I
Mm,
going to look for that career path? Because hockey is not a sport that you earn a living, so to speak, and or whether it was athletics. They're tough sports to fork
mm,
a life out of, and I do think there was also an element of trying to figure out, when it comes to my sexuality and how
mm,
that translates in the locker room, so to speak, and
mm,
always feeling a little bit different and not aligned with that banter or that comfortability.
mm.
So I think, following that creative route and that career path, so to speak, I obviously ended up traveling. I lived in the Netherlands, I lived in Denmark, I did 6 weeks in Zambia. So, like, being exposed to different cultures and languages and cuisine, it kind
Mm,
of took me away from that bubble of Edinburgh.
mm.
And meeting Daniel, put me on another path to the US that I had never considered, in all honesty. And that's been a journey in the last couple of years. And again, I was speaking to my dad about this just yesterday, and the decision to leave and move overseas it was no easy one to make.
That's huge.
Yeah, and I don't think and I don't know if we talk about it enough, because the
Mm,
world, there's this beauty about the world opening, but it
mm,
also puts you into the possibility of finding that life away from your
mm,
childhood and your upbringing. And my uncle and auntie live in Australia, for example, and I
mm,
have such a different understanding of what that journey must have been like for
mm.
them. Or my cousin who lives in Barcelona, and you do end up having to sacrifice a little bit. And
Mm.
thank goodness we have, technology. For example, the fact that we can do this podcast from two
Yeah,
different countries is a blessing and a beauty. But at the same time, it never replaces that physical connection.
yeah.
So I do think, distance it molds relationships differently. But I think if you put the hard work in and you're clear and communicating and you make time for those that mean the most to you, you can do the best that you can do, right? And in the moments that you are together, you make the most of them and you cherish them and you make new memories, and
Oh,
so that's very much my focus when we all come together, is to try and make as most of every living second.
how lovely is that? Have you kind of surprised yourself along your journey? Have you kind of woken up one morning and gone, "Whoa, I did do that, and I did travel there, and I did meet this person and do whatever."
Right, yeah, no, very much so. I think I have a few moments of them quite often, actually. The first one that comes to mind is when I actually got my first internship in Denmark, and I never thought I was going to live in a country out with of the UK, let
Mm,
alone speaking a different language. And even though it's not that far away, and it's still within that European culture bubble,
mm,
it was a huge kind of like pat on the back moment for me. It's
right.
actually when I got my first tattoo as well, and I cemented that kind of reminder of like I can do what I put my mind to, or I am worthy of doing, and what I wish to do, or that may challenge my uncomfortabilities. So I think that was the first experience I had of that. And maybe from then it kind of snowballed, so to speak, where, I went to Zambia for 6 weeks, as I just mentioned. That was a huge cultural experience that I just look back and go, how did I do that, from that, Scottish boy growing up with everything around me, to experience the most joyous people that I've ever met with so little.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then moving to America was another kind of like what's going on moment, but I followed my heart, and I think that's like what I look back on and I can be prideful on, is that I have followed my heart wholeheartedly. And it may not have always been the best decision making, but because I was falling from that place of kind of love and longing, it's kind of started to, I look back and go, wow, if this is only the first part of life, what's ahead,
Yeah,
so to speak.
yeah. And do you find, I mean, in terms of that sense of meaning and purpose to your life, is it, as you mentioned just there, is it governed by that love of finding
Mm,
the best and doing your best?
yes, no, exactly. I think you've nailed it on the head there, Sid, in terms of like the one thing I will say, I think purpose,
Mm.
there's these words in life that I think you start discovering that trigger
Yeah.
yourself, and they trigger. And I think purpose is one that does trigger me a lot. And I think ultimately because it also was a trigger word for my mom. And I think she
Mm.
struggled with this purpose of life, because I think we're all kind of educated and told and encouraged to find a purpose. I
Mm.
think purpose, there's a permanence to that word. And I
Mm.
think the reality of life is that it is so like so much changes, and therefore that purpose, quotation marks, can change depending on where you are in life, what comes at you at life. So I'm very much come to the terms of like I'm on a path of just trying to be my best self.
Brilliant.
And I think that's what I would encourage everyone, if they take away something from this dialogue, is don't be driven by an ultimate, that sets almost that concrete feeling. Embrace that, change is tough, but it's also good. And you'll be surprised, I think, once you let those shackles off, just how much you can achieve and be exposed to.
Oh, lovely. So if you could go back to younger Corey, what would
Hmm.
you, I mean, would you say to him, don't forget, love hard, laugh hard and play hard? Was that the kind of thing you'd say back to your younger self?
You might have just summarized this brand that I need to create for myself.
Oh,
Actually, no, I think wholeheartedly, yes. I think it's about keep believing, keep having fun, keep that childhood in mind and that
oh,
childlike energy. Trust your heart, lead with love. Yeah, not a bad thing even, and it's not a bad thing even if you feel out of place or different. I think that's where I maybe struggled a little bit. Is that
wow.
I saw that I tried to see the best in everything, and I think that's what Mum did as well. And ultimately, you'll find yourself, and life is about shaping and molding, not that destination or that fixed outcome that we were just talking about. And yeah, change is okay, ultimately. And yeah, yeah, you're on a very unique. Everyone is on a very unique journey, and only you can really be the driver behind it.
How lovely is that? So, if, is that the advice you would give to somebody if they were listening to this? It's like, you are unique, be on that journey and, embrace it all.
100%.
Right.
But at the same time, I know it's it's so easy to say, especially when we're at places of
Mm,
strength and mental security, and
mm,
when life's going right. And I would say I'm in a very fortunate position where I am at a place of life where I feel secure.
yes.
But there are days that I don't, even with the same roof over
Mm,
my head, food in the fridge, a loving partner, loving family. So I think there's an element of that individual journey, but also there's the importance of opening up, finding your tribe without
mm,
forcing it. And
mm,
that, and for some, that is family. For others, it's that chosen family.
brilliant.
And that's no easy journey either, but it's getting that balance right of individual self worth, but also finding that sense of community connection through that tribe. And that may be on the sports field, it may be, school friends from back when you're at primary school or high school or secondary school. I'm getting my American verbiage thrown in there now. Or maybe it's a case of, you go and join a local community group. My mum joined a local community garden, and she was able to be herself individually in that moment of pruning and looking after nature, but then coming together at lunch with a spectrum of humanity. And I think, it's that balance and that fine line that I don't have the key to, but I'm sure everyone can explore that journey and try to find it.
It's beautiful. So, how do you see the magic in you and the magic in others?
Oh, that's a difficult one. The whole, and I think it goes back to that individual that you, and as I
Mm,
said, like I'm not there yet. I
mm.
know I've still got a lot of work. I was even talking to my dad yesterday and my sister, and my dad was giving us a little bit of a sermon on, Corey, carry on. You're amazing individuals. You've achieved so
Oh,
much, and you're just incredible. And
oh,
then my dad will be the first to doubt himself when he gets, asked to do something or um, awarded something or kind of boosted up himself. Like he doesn't see his own worth sometimes, and I think that's a kind of a jarring experience to see
yeah,
him having achieved so
yeah,
much. I think he talks about this journey of him as well, of where he's also still trying to figure out what he's doing in life, and he's in his I won't disclose age, but
yeah,
he's a
yeah.
little bit more mature. He's ahead of time, but yeah. So I think that's interesting. So when it comes to me, and I find it hard, but what I can say is like seeing others through joy or connection
Yeah.
or demonstrating love. I think that's when I see the magic also, because it allows me to reflect of, maybe it's me seeing another couple holding hands, and then I'll be like, oh, I'm holding my hands with my husband proudly and happily.
Yeah.
That's magic. Or seeing the kids that I coach and the
Mm.
smiles on their faces, and it's going like, oh, I've provided that joy for someone. They are providing that joy to me, and therefore that's when I can kind of do a little bit of self-reflection on that front. So I think that's where the magic is seeing what you want for others in yourself.
Oh, so lovely. And when your dad said that yesterday about, or you mentioned about the kind of sometimes he doubts,
Mm,
is that kind of make him even more beautiful and more human? Because there is
100%.
that vulnerability, isn't there? Because you always kind of look to your mum and dad or whoever is, as you say, your chosen family, and you
Yeah,
almost see them as a rock that's so strong. But then to see that vulnerability, especially with your dad, it must be like, wow.
100%. And I
Mm,
think that's only, when it comes to my dad's vulnerability, we do live in this patriarchal society where we
mm,
don't see men
mm,
embrace their emotions as openly and as freely. And to see my dad going through this journey, especially in the last couple of years, has been really rewarding, and it makes
mm,
me happy because it allows him to find that humanity, as you just mentioned about being human, and
mm,
that raw authenticity that I think we
mm.
should all be given the grace to embody, feel, and embrace. And so, yeah, no, it is a reminder of the importance of doing so as well.
Oh,
And
lovely.
again, the fact that we have that connection it
Mm.
reinforces
But
that same.
also, but also that beauty and that honesty to
Mhm.
to be honest and to share that. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Oh. And in terms of what gives you your sort of, I mean, you mentioned about sort of coaching younger people, field hockey
Mm.
and stuff. What gives you that sort of fizzy pop moment? What makes you kind of like burst inside of like, whoa, this is just so lovely and
Yeah, no, I think I go back to my sanctuary, and my sanctuary, I've got
oh,
two, and there's number one is the Botanical Gardens in Edinburgh. It
right.
is this most beautiful space that we were very fortunate enough to grow up just around the corner from. So it became our backyard, so to speak, or
Mm,
back garden. And back then, you're not meant to really run and play in the botanical gardens,
right.
but as
Yeah.
kids, we found our spaces, and it was our playground. I have very fond memories growing up with childhood friends and families. We were there. Oh my, we some points it was a daily, and so being immersed in nature and that change from a place of play to adulthood, it became the place where I would go and walk with my mom or my dad or my sister and have deep conversations and share joyous moments where I'd cry. It would be my individual place where I'd go and escape from the business of the world and just be lost in my own thoughts. It's become a place of celebration. It's where we ultimately celebrated Mum's life under
Mm,
the redwood trees there, or the sequoia trees. It became a place of connection there because when I moved to California, we would exchange messages over text and WhatsApp and all that. But I would always get pictures from my mum and my dad and my sister hugging the trees there,
wow.
and this became a little bit of a family tradition that mum ultimately sparked. And I will share a little. I'll be quick on this story, but
Mhm.
basically, this became a tradition because the bark of those sequoia trees are quite hard, and my dad, being that brute rugby player, he'd go up and punch the tree and test the bark. But my mum changed that thought process. It was like, hey, why don't we hug the trees instead, Dad? Let's
Oh,
like share some love. And she ultimately started hugging these trees, and we'd like connect with one another's arms around these like massive trunks. And there was a day when there's a lady from the botanical gardens who does the wedding planning side of things, and kind of was looking over and was going like, "Oh, what's going over here?" kind of thing. And she was talking to the florist, and I was going to be doing a wedding bouquet. And my mum went over to them and was like, "Hey, would you mind just joining us and creating
oh,
this circle?"
oh,
And this same lady told me this story at my mum's celebration of life and was like, "Corey, that was the first time I met your mum." And I'll be honest, I was like,
wow.
"Oh, she's a bit, what's going on here?"
Yeah, yeah.
And the florist apparently was in tears. And it's those little moments in life
Wow.
that, yes, yeah, my mum just provided and continues to do so, even not though she's no longer with us. And
Mm.
yeah, I would encourage everyone, go hug a tree, see how you feel, be uncomfortable in it, and just embrace that moment. And it might give you a little bit of solace that you've been looking for.
How lovely is that? What a lovely story. And if you could use one word to describe yourself, what would that be?
Ooh, I had to do some brainstorming on this one yesterday, but and I was swaying between a few words, but I think the one that's ultimately come through for me is I'd like to say passionate.
Brilliant.
I'm hugely passionate in whatever I do, and I will give my 110, 20, 30, 50% to be the best I can in that. And maybe that is a little bit too much pressure, but I think through passion, you find that love, you find that joy. And yeah, I'm very prideful to have that quality.
Oh, how lovely. And what does the rest of the year look like for you?
Oh, I have yeah, it's actually a busy year. I've got a big Christmas lunch that I'm planning, funnily enough, at
Well,
the
have
end of
you?
this year
Oh, nice.
through work, which is always a special time of the year, as it always reminds me of family. But ultimately, yeah, no, it's just getting ready for next year's actually a big year. It's my sister celebrating a milestone birthday. Me and
Oh,
Daniel are celebrating 10 years of marriage, and yeah, so next year is very much celebrating life, family, connection, and I'm excited for what's ahead. Um, yeah, I'm very excited.
oh, how lovely, Corey. We spoke a few weeks ago, didn't we? And I loved our
We did.
conversation then. I've even loved this one even more. It's so lovely to talk to you, and thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you, Sid. Thank you
Really
for reaching
beautiful.
out, and thank you to me as well. I put my hands up, and I'll say I hadn't heard
Yeah.
of me or yourself, and I did my research, and you're doing exactly what the world needs and has needed and will need, and
Oh,
these connections are important. So, no, I wish you and everyone involved all the very best in the future, and I will be very much taking the tools and the conversation that we've just had today into my life moving forward. And I look forward to seeing, what's ahead for us all.
Corey, you're a wonderful person. Thank you so much.
No worries at all. You take care.